It's that time of year again, the most commercialized romantic holiday where, your significant other might buy you flowers or boxes of chocolate to take you on a romantic date, and where once again, I am sacrificing a teddy bear. So, if you are new to my channel, hi, hello, this might seem absurd. If you are a longtime viewer, however, you will know that this is a tradition that I have now started for the past, this will be year number 4. This is the victim of choice this year. If you want to see the previous ones, I have a video on all of them. I will put them on screen here. They have been getting, I do believe, slightly more absurd and also, a little bit more complicated. And some of them have been repurposing of the teddy bear and others were completely redoing it. The first one, I actually took it completely apart and just used it as a pattern. But today we're doing another repurposing. And I picked this lovely bear because I loved his color. And this year, I have 2. So, what are we doing this year? I'm very excited. I'm gonna be turning these into a Hydra teddy bear. That's right, 1 teddy bear, multiple heads. The minimum number of heads that I want is 5, but I kind of really want to shoot for 7 because I feel like this is a more is more, and the more heads, the more absurd this is going to be. These are my victims for this year. They're very sweet, they're very snuggly. They did nothing wrong except be in the store when I walked by. So this is what we've got this year. The main reason for 2 of them, I didn't even explain that. I think that I'm going to need extra fabric for the heads, and because this is a very mauve-y color, I'm going to be making all of the individual teddy bear heads, but that is why 2. One of these will serve as the base and primary torso of the bear, and the other one is going to be turned into fabric for all of the heads. So another difference is this teddy bear does not come with a heart. Not all of the ones I've done have come with or have a heart. However, I have a really cute idea for a pun. So let me know what you think it's going to be in the comments down below. I'm not going to reveal it until a little bit later, but I'm very excited for it and I think it'll be just perfectly stupid. So let me know what you think it should be in the comments down below. And if I like one of them better than what I pick, maybe I'll redo the heart with what you say. So please, this is a genuine request. Let me know your thoughts for a Hydra Valentine's themed pun in the comments down below. And when I'm talking about Hydra, we're talking about the Greek mythical beast, not the Marvel evil Nazi organization. That's not what we're talking about. A teddy bear just fell out of my lap. We are talking about the Greek myth creature who has multiple heads. Did you know that he doesn't actually have wings? In a lot of the early depictions, it's just a serpent. So I don't think I'm going to add wings to it. I know that I'm talking about the anatomy of a mythical creature as I'm about to turn it into a teddy bear form. I realize the absurdity of that statement, but that's just something. I don't think I'm gonna add wings. I think this is already gonna be complex enough. This is more than enough rambles to tell you that I'm taking this thing apart. So step 1 is dismemberment. So one thing I don't think I've explained in my years of teddy bear massacre is exactly how I kind of get these started. And I do typically tend to start with the neck seam regardless of what I'm going to do. I found that it's one of the easier ones to get into. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push and separate the fur. You can kind of see, if you lay all the fur flat, you can kind of see where those seams are. But what we're going to do is we're going to find the center of a seam here, and I'm going to do my best to keep this in frame. It might get a little hairy, no pun intended, but literally you kind of just want to follow this seam and push the fabric apart until you happen to see your opening. What we're looking for is we're trying to stretch the fabric just enough so that I can actually see one of the threads connecting these 2 pieces together. And so it's really hard to see, but I have caught a thread there. And so we're going to cut it. And as soon as you have a hole, you can kind of push down on it a little bit and force some of those fibers to separate. And all of a sudden you can start to see your threads much better. And so I would keep going. Anytime you seam rip, you want to keep the pointy end away from you. I know I'm going to be pointing towards my fingers, but I'm still not going to be stabbing towards myself with force. We're going to be pushing away with force, and you're just going to kind of keep going. The main reason I do this on the back of the teddy bear is because of this intense stretching and pulling motion. You want to make sure
that you aren't going to ruin any of the fabric that you actually want to reuse, and you maintain that structure. So if you do this to the front of the teddy bear, there's going to be a lot of warping. There's going to be a lot of potential for that kind of warping, which can just ruin the look of the final teddy bear. So honestly, once you have a hole big enough, I highly recommend beginning the disembowelment. You see how much easier it is to open that up now? And so you just keep going. Being very careful. This kind of fabric on these sorts of teddy bears is unfortunately rather cheap. You know, it is a mass-produced, pretty cheap Valentine's Day plush. So you want to be really careful because the seam ripper is sharp enough to go straight through the fabric like that. And it will rip and tear it if you push with the motion. So you want to be very careful to not actually do that. So just a little bit more disembowelment there. And it's always okay if you undo a little bit of a seam that you need to redo. You can just hand stitch that later. Or at least that's what I do when I am working on these bears. So yeah, the next step is just finish the decapitation. We have a body. And we have a head. So one of the things that I am going to do is I'm going to seam rip the snout off of this bear because I do want this nice soft pink fabric. However, that means that I get to show you what the inside of these bears look like, which if you've never seen my previous videos, I'm going to give you a little bit of a jump scare warning because they're a little creepy looking on the inside. And by a little, I mean a lot. So ready? 1, 2, 3. This one actually isn't as bad as some of the other ones I've seen. So yeah, that's what the inside of this looks like. But to take the muzzle off, so what this is it's basically a stabilizer to prevent this hole from opening any wider. This white fabric does not stretch, and the hole is there so you can stuff it. And then these are safety eyes. Unfortunately, I don't know that I've ever figured out a way to remove these that isn't just cut them out of the teddy bear. That's been the way that I found that works the best. But yeah, it looks like there are 2 lines of stitching here. There's one on the outside and then one on the inside. I'm just going to go ahead and coax this on out. Before I go too much further, I want to just comment on how this activity can be useful in kind of understanding how things are put together. So when you actually take something apart, especially something that has such a hard to visualize fabric like this, you can actually look at something and see how they did it. And so you can see that how they got this shape of the bear is different from the front and the back. The back is done in 2 separate panels because you don't care as much about a seam being visible down the back, but you do down the front of the bear. So instead of a seam, they instead achieved that curvature through a variety of darts. And it looks like there are 3 for each side of the head. There's one here on the side, one here on top, basically 2 right around the ear, and we have the same aside and on the other. This is also where you can see that this is not necessarily perfect. There's not, things that are manufactured are not always going to be perfect. And so what you have here is if you kind of hold them, you can see the inconsistencies in the darts. That's not a problem, especially when you're making like a plush cuddly toy. You don't really care about having it too exact, but it's just something to note, especially if you are like me and ever give yourself a hard time over the accuracy of your sewing projects. And actually, it looks like there are only 5 darts. There's 3 across the top. The other ear is right here on this side. And this one, I'm assuming, was supposed to be a centered dart. Oh, it might be a little bit more centered. I think these are a little bit more evenly spaced, but the seam allowance has been folded over, so it doesn't quite look like it. So I just find if you ever have something that you are willing to take apart, you will learn a lot about the way these sorts of things are constructed, especially if it is a more complicated garment. Or creation like a teddy bear. It's just something I find interesting and highly recommend if you have clothing you are willing to take apart. You should, because you never know what you're going to learn or what horrifying creature you're going to find hiding inside. So step 1 after disembowelment is flaying. And so what I've done is I have completely disassembled the head of the teddy bear. I have the other head just so you can kind of see what's going on here. So this is the face panel. These are the 2 back panels. This is the snout panel that gets wrapped and makes that adorable little cone snout there. This is his cute little nose. These are all 4 pieces of the ear because the ears are double-sided, so they're sewn in half. And then these are the two pieces that were in the center of the snout supporting this structure. There was one inside the nose, keeping the nose taut, and then there's one inside the mouth here, keeping the mouth taut. So what I'm going to do next is turn this into a pattern, which is why I have gone to the effort of marking all of these little darts. And so all of these little darts, I have gone and I have marked with a Sharpie where the stitch line is and where that center point of the dart was. Because if I go and transfer this directly to a pattern, all I'm gonna find is where that inner line was. It's not entirely clear where those should line up. And so now I can accurately mark my pattern to replicate this at this scale. So there's a few steps that have to go into this now. One, I have to make my pattern pieces, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't mark whether or not there was a front or back to the ear. I'm gonna assume it doesn't matter. I don't think there's a direction to the ear either. We're just gonna make a general semicircle shape and hope that that works, because I didn't think about that. These extra lines right here, these are where the ears go in. This teddy bear was done in a different way, where the ear is actually folded along this line here. There's one stitch line here where the ear was actually sewn into this corner of fabric, and then there's another stitch line where the dart was actually sewn together and the ear was wedged in between. The eyes are still in. I'm not going to remove them. I think I should still be able to get the general placement of where this mouth should be. And once I have an understanding of all of the pieces of this pattern at this scale, that's when I get to use math and I can actually shrink this pattern in a reliable format instead of just kind of guesstimating what this should look like. And from there, I'll be able to map out and figure out how I want to actually approach doing this.
Welcome to another episode of Do As I Say, Not As I Do. And so here I am marking out the pattern pieces for this teddy bear. Notice, in no way, shape, or form are my pieces secured to the paper that I am working with, not by pattern weights, not by pins, not by anything. For some reason, I decided to use a cardstock-ish material for this. Parchment paper is the best for drafting patterns if you don't have pattern paper. But parchment paper sound, like the crinkly sound, is honestly something that like drives me insane sometimes. So sometimes I just try not to use it. And a lot of this was freehand and kind of guesstimating because, again, this doesn't have to be so precise. I do need it to be relatively accurate. So I did try to make sure that I captured all of the darts and those other little details that are crucial to what actually shapes and forms the kind of structure of the teddy bear. I try to label my patterns when I know what to label them. Really, this was more about general shapes and vibes, even though I do kind of need it to be accurate because the whole plan was to shrink this using math. If you were to do this for yourself, I would recommend securing your fabric pieces to your pattern paper, whether it be by paper weights or pins, some kind of method to keep it in place to ensure that you are actually capturing the shape of the form correctly.
So I spared you the tedium of watching me actually measure these things. And as you can see, what I have here is, where did my pencil go? Because I was going to use it as a pointer. There it is. A very loose sketch of what the piece actually is. It's not a good sketch at all. So I have a loose sketch of what it is, and then some generic terms that kind of cover all of the dimensions. Because these are curves and I don't have a protractor or anything, I don't even have like a French ruler. I have a quilting ruler. That's about it. I just kind of folded from making sure this point touches the half, so I have it determined. I know exactly how long that is, and then I know how long this is and basically where this curve should intersect it. And I have another data point of the same. I just took this point and made sure that it lined up as exact as I could with the bottom, and I have an understanding of now where this point intersects that, and should hopefully I can use these measurements to then figure out where this curve is. I could do a lot more lines like this. The thing is, the good thing about this fabric is it is very forgiving in a lot of ways. This doesn't have to be perfect, except one, I'm an engineer, two, I'm a perfectionist, so that statement's going right out the window as I prepare to basically figure out what I want this to be. Now, the way that I'm going to figure out the size smaller is where the unflayed head is going to come in, because this head gives me a general understanding of what the actual base width and base height. Using that, I'm going to determine how much smaller I want the new head to be. And from there, I'm going to take the basically percentage difference and I'm going to apply that to all of these numbers, which should give me the new dimensions of the smaller teddy bear head pattern. This would be a lot easier if I just scan these into a program like Illustrator and then scaled them that way, but I don't have the capability to do that, so I'm gonna do it the old-fashioned way because this is still gonna work. Now I just get to determine how big I actually want these heads to be. My heater is absolutely roaring right now, so I'm so sorry if you can hear it. But what I have here is all of my little pieces. We have the back of the head, we have the 2 ears, we have the nose connected to the mouth, and somewhere around here I have the face. There it is. Nope, that's an ear. Well, theoretically, somewhere around here I had cut out the face that's supposed to go to this. Because what I'm doing is obviously sewing it together. So I'm going to sew up the center back seam of the head first, both of my little ears. I'm going to sew the nose in first because what I noticed when looking at this teddy bear nose, this is so subtle, but you can see how this doesn't line up here. And what this says to me is that the nose was sewn in first and then this was stitched together and it just wasn't lined up properly. So I'm going to sew the nose in first and I'm going to go, I think, for a flatter nose than he's got. So hopefully that'll make that a little bit easier. Theoretically, the seam allowance is built into all of these and theoretically that seam allowance is almost non-existent. So these proportions might not be perfect, which is why I have only cut out the pieces for a single teddy bear. I'm going to put his face together and then I'm going to see how it works and whether or not I need to make any adjustments before I cut up all of my teddy bear fabric. But anyways, I'm going to get this sewn. For the sake of a dramatic reveal, there he is! It doesn't have eyeballs, clearly. I looked at the time. This took me about an hour and a half to fully sew everything together, and there's a few reasons for that. And that is because everything in his stupid little mouth, all of these darts, there's darts in, obviously, I'm going to show the pattern pieces instead. So all of these darts got hand sewn, and I did do all of the darts for the mouthpiece. These darts I was actually able to machine sew. However, I only did 3 of them. I didn't do these 2 on either side of the head. Those are the ones that on the big teddy bear, the ears are stitched into, so they kind of like curl forwards. That's not happening on this small scale. Absolutely not. The other thing that got completely hand stitched in was the nose got hand stitched in, and this muzzle actually got fully hand stitched into the head. I just could not get the sewing machine to work in such a small space. So I think that that's okay. So what I'm going to do is cut all the pieces, and then I'm going to turn this into an assembly line. I'm going to cut out as many of these snouts as I can, and as many of the noses as I can, and I'm going to get basically the snouts fully sewn together, because this requires hand sewing. The reason I'm also going to start with the snouts, actually, is because I think this is going to be the limiting factor on how many of these bears I can actually make. So I still have 1 snout that I can get out of this fabric here. So that means that I should be able to get 2 more out of this snout. I have the feet, and so I should be able to get, theoretically, 2 more each out of this. I'm not saying I'm making that many teddy bears. That would be 2, 4, 6, 8 total. I kind of want an odd number for some reason, but if I can get 7 bears, the snout is going to be one limiting factor. The other limiting factor is going to be the head. This is a very large piece. So whereas the ear and the behind the head pattern pieces, these are relatively small, and so I can kind of piecemeal these around. And in fact, these ears, I essentially used just 1 ear to make the back of his head. Unfortunately, the ear is not big enough for the face. So I'm going to try to exclusively use the ears for the back of the head, and then use this and kind of finagle it around. So I cut the current face out of the one side of the head, and so I should be able to get, it looks like 3 maybe out of this full face, because I'm gonna need a lot of the other body pieces to cover the necks if I want to make the necks any kind of size. So I'm trying to use as much of the head fabric as I can first before I start cutting into those pieces, because I want to try to preserve, those are the biggest, most intact pieces I have, you know, so like if I can avoid not cutting into this tube, I want to, because I might be able to cut this in half and get like 2 necks out of it. So the heads are my priority for both creation and destruction. And I was leaving this one intact until I had to fully take it apart, just so that I could better understand kind of how these proportions are supposed to sit. I may embroider a little mouth on him. I might not. I kind of just like it like this. I think it communicates what it needs to be. I just think it needs some eyes, and then it'll be appropriately terrifying. So yeah, I have a lot of carnage, but I have successfully created a teddy bear head. The assembly line is in progress. I have decided that I am going to make 7 heads total. So that means I have 6 additional back of the heads cut and pinned together, ready to sew. I think I need to cut 1 more face. I have 5 face panels here. Oh, God. So yeah, as you can see, that they shed. They absolutely shed. It is absolutely infuriating. It's going everywhere. I feel like it's in my lungs at this point. But I'm just trying to kind of clean it up as I go. This is probably the worst part about me doing this every year, is I'm pretty sure there's still fuzz from like when I did the Baphomet one. I find the red fuzz all over the place. But anyways, we're aiming for 7 heads because for some reason I've decided I want an odd number. And then I have all of the ears. I have to sew all of these together first, so I have enough, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes. So I have enough for all of these, and these have to get all sewn together. I have used all 50 of my little clips, so luckily I am not making more. I'm going to go ahead and sew all of those. I have hand stitched all of the tiny little snouts, and then I realized I needed to do 1 more, so I have that there. I just wanted you to see the absolutely absurd number of pieces that make up the ears. This is so many pieces. One thing I wanted to mention, because it's something that's actually I've gotten tripped up with it, and I think to unfortunately worse final products in years past of doing this, that may seem obvious to other people, but I don't know, it just didn't seem obvious to me. So obviously this fur has a direction, and it's really important when you go to sew something like this that you pay attention to the fur. So although I have all of these clipped, some of them I've done a better job than others, you really don't want the fur sticking out the side. You want to try to brush as much of the fur in, so that way when you flip it out, you have the nice, you know, kind of fuzzy all the way around, and it doesn't really visibly look like the fur is caught, because otherwise you'll get what happened here, where the ends of this fur are caught in the seam, and sometimes you can coax them out and pull it out, and it just looks nicer to be fluffed instead of have this curled, like rolled over section here. That's pretty obvious. I didn't do that on purpose. I literally would try to avoid it, but you can see basically the extra fluff sticking out on the inside means that it's going to have this weird kind of much more visible seam, especially when you're working with fur like this. That's just something I wanted to point out. If you ever find yourself in the position of dismantling and resewing a teddy bear, that's probably useful information for you to have.
This clip is just an additional bit of sewing the ears. I showed previously stitching around the outside. I did do 1 more stitching once I flipped them right side out, and that was just to close them along the center. This fabric is relatively slippery, and so to make sure that I was going to consistently capture both panels of the ear, or even if I didn't, that the ear was going to stay closed, I did 1 more line of stitching across the flat side of the ear just to keep everything together. Next came the assembly line of sewing all the heads together, and while I didn't use the darts to place the ears in the head, I did decide to sew the ears into one side of the head before fully stitching the heads together. Again, I was trying to minimize the number of moving pieces because this fabric is slippery and liked to get away from me. You also see me using clips throughout this entire project. I just thought it was going to be easier to keep a handle on things because pins can warp things, and at such a small scale, I did not need that happening, so I went with the clips that keep everything flat. If you'll notice throughout the assembly, I am not really using any markers or identifying pieces or really any kind of consistent seam allowance. A lot of this was just kind of winging it and hoping that it was all going to come together at the end, which is what the test of putting the back of the head on the front was. I lined up my center back seam with the unmeasured center dart on the teddy bear, and it actually ended up working out pretty well, and every single head lined up perfectly and had the bottom meet where it needed to. I used a lot of clips because I did not want this moving.
I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teddy bear heads. Not all of them are perfect. There's one where the front bit of the ear didn't get fully captured, so I may go over and try to like fix that or sew that up a little bit. I do think in the grand scheme of things, you're not really going to be able to see. These guys are messy on the inside. I've been trying to cut my threads as I go, but honestly, they look really good, and I'm actually quite pleased. There's also a couple strands of thread that are on the outside of the teddy bear. I was trying really hard to not have that happen, but it's okay. I just got to be careful and try not to snip the fur when I cut those off. The only thing that these don't have that the original had is that support for the inner snout. I haven't decided if I want to do it. I needed to figure out how many heads I could create before I went ahead and worked on the inner supports, which is what's up next. So I have a plan. Oh, my camera's wiggling. Please stop that. Sorry. It is attached to a stand that is connected to my table, so if I smack my table too much, my camera moves. So sorry. I have a plan for the next. So this is the longest strip of fabric I have that is almost perfectly straight on both edges. As you can see, these edges don't line up perfectly, but I think that that's okay. And I have 2 of these. I believe these were the leg panels. These are the longest panels I have. And one of the things that I need to figure out is all of the different lengths I want for the heads. I don't want them to be the same length. So this is going to be my average length. One head is going to just get attached to this directly. That means that I need lengths shorter and longer. Of the pieces I have 2 other pieces that I think are perfect as far as I can just seam them up the sides. These will be my shorter. As you can see, they are very not square on the ends. So I'm going to go ahead and square these pieces, and then these 2 can get used as necks. And then that is just over half of my necks. And then I need longer pieces. So I'm going to use the larger straight sections that I have. I'm debating because the other ones, these arm ones that I will have to use 2 pieces kind of on either side and cut them out. So there'll be 2 seams, which isn't a bad thing, but it may be a little bit more obvious. This is 4 necks. So I need 3 more. The longest necks are probably going to have seams in a couple different places, and I think that's okay. They are going to be bendable and posable, which is why they don't need to be crazy different lengths, but I just need them to be kind of close enough that I can work on posing it. I'm going to put these 2 in the front, and then these 2 are going to be 2 of the 3 in the middle. I'm going to do like a 2, 3, 2, because that adds up to 7. Sometimes I can do math. The other thing is I think I have more hand sewing in front of me because I've been trying to think about how to get, and I have not checked to see whether or not this dimension actually works. I'm not really worrying about it. I will just gather it in the back of the teddy bear if there's more space on this. 1, I have to sew eyeballs onto these first, which is hand sewing. And then 2, I don't know how I'm putting this looks wrong. This whole thing is wrong. I don't know how I'm putting these together. So there's no good way to do it, but what comes first is eyes and tubes. So that's oh my god, this is an abomination. Anyways, that's where we are.
So this is me squaring up all of those little pieces of the necks and eventually figuring out how I kind of wanted them to go together. Since I don't have any footage later of me attaching the heads to the necks, I will explain how I did it here and some things I took into consideration. One thing, I attached the head on the end of the neck that would make the hair direction be pointing down. I thought it would look really weird if the fur was like going up towards the head, so I was trying to take the fur direction into account. And also what I ended up doing was having the head right side out and stuffing it inside the neck and then hand stitching it all the way around. This allowed me to put the wire support for the head in and stuff the head while I then slowly turned the tube inside out so the head still had stuffing. Unfortunately, this didn't end up working perfectly, and I did have to open a hole at the back of the neck so I could add a little bit more stuffing to the head and fully get them fleshed out. But overall, that was an incredibly great strategy to get the heads on the necks, get them stuffed, and with the supports in place at basically the same time.
So these are the different sizes of necks I ended up with. I have technically several different sizes. I think that this spread makes this look like the outlier, but I actually don't think that this super long one is the problem. I think these super short ones are the problem. I think I'm going to extend these two short ones to more of this medium-ish length, and then I feel like that would be a really good kind of middle length, because I arguably do want longer. I think a little bit longer is better. I think these are going to be also just a little too short to do anything with. So I'm going to take the shortest. Luckily, it's very easy. Probably just seam rip down a little bit here, attach it just like I did there, sew it all the way around, trying to match up the fur direction as much as possible. And then I will show you the necks and how I'm attaching them onto the teddy bears, because I'm pretty sure it's more hand stitching. Oh god, these are gonna look fucking creepy. Oh no.
You know when your girlfriend starts fucking giggling like that, you should be very careful about what she's producing over there.
Come look at him. I'm trying to pick what eyeballs I want, and
That is just a good unsettling, isn't it?
so I don't know if those are better. So we have those.
Mm-hmm.
We have,
The slightly smaller ones.
yeah, the slightly smaller with just the two holes.
I feel like those are better.
Better, or do we go
With the big ass
the
eyes?
massive eyeballs?
I don't know. I feel like the smallest ones might be the best.
I do think that those are the best. I think, are those
They're
only...
the cutest.
They are the
The
cutest.
biggest ones are the funniest.
Yeah, so I think I'm definitely gonna go with those.
So yeah, I think the 2-hole ones are the best ones.
Okay, that's a shame there aren't more varieties of that in here.
Yeah.
Okay, but those are the winner.
I don't know why I remembered to record stitching the eyeballs on and not stitching the heads onto the necks, but whatever. The only thing I'll comment on here is I did not mark where I put the eyeballs on the teddy bears. I just kind of winged it. So when you see them all again, you will notice they are not even. They all look a little funny. They all look a little weird. But you know what? I think that gives him character, so I'm gonna say it's fine. I approached the making of the base of this teddy bear in a very similar manner to how I approached making the angel from last year. And that is starting with a cardboard base, and then I wanted to make sure that I was going to be able to weigh it down and have some sort of structure that supported the monstrosity going upon it. I just kind of roughly cut this out of cardboard, creating a general shape using the outside seam kind of lines of the teddy bear. Now, this will result in something that is bigger than the actual footprint inside of the bear, but it is a really, really good place to start with. So I cut that out, kind of trimmed it down, and then the only way to test if this size actually works is try to shove it in the bear and keep cutting it down until it fits. This next part is where I start questioning my own decision making, because for some reason I decided that this year one cardboard base wasn't good enough and that I needed it to have 2 layers. Did it need this? I really don't think so. Did I do it anyway? Clearly yes, you're watching the footage of it. I still don't know why I made this decision. Again, like the angel from last year, I decided I was going to use some form of dried legume as my weight for the inside of this bear. Now, instead of making a shape that fits the whole base and just has basically pockets where I attach the wooden skewers, this time I needed to have a lot of space for styrofoam, so instead I made 3 little bags and I filled each of these with beans. My plan was 2 of these were going to go onto the legs and 1 was going to get secured into the center of the teddy bear. I did leave enough space in these bags that I didn't have to hand stitch them closed. I just used my sewing machine to sew them shut. And then to secure them onto the base, I didn't want to just hot glue the bag. I kind of wanted it to have a place that it would sit so it didn't really get loose in the bear. So I decided that I was going to create these little cardboard loop things and then kind of really secure those down and then shove the bag of beans through. Where I had my problem is I am impatient and did not wait for the hot glue to fully dry. So the hot glue got stuck to the bag, which meant that the bag didn't really want to go through the tunnel that I'd made. So I spent far longer than probably ended up being necessary to shove the bean bag through the cardboard. And then I hot glued the beanbag to the cardboard just to make sure it really stayed in place. I just did not want these like slipping or sliding and ending up in like the feet of the bear and kind of just throwing everything off. So I did this on both sides, and as you can see, I have separately cut out my styrofoam already. And I should note about the styrofoam, this is like a very soft, spongy styrofoam. It's not the crumbly one, which thank God, it made it so easy to work with for this project, and honestly was the best material I could have chosen, and it was just leftover packing material from a standing desk that we bought. So as you saw, I had that big base semicircle of styrofoam cut out, but I ended up having to cut a chunk out of the center because, again, I wanted a bag of beans in the center. And the reason for this is I was really worried about the weight distribution of just having the feet there. So I kind of cut it down, and I just used hot glue to glue all of this together. I was worried a little bit about being able to shove like my wire supports through the glue, but it ended up not being too much of a problem, I don't think. And yeah, when I had the second layer glued on, I decided to shove it in the bear because at this point I wasn't sure if I actually needed a third layer that I had made, which I did eventually end up go ahead and glued in place. And I did have to cut seam rip open the back seam of the teddy bear just a little bit more to actually enable me to get that in place. Just gonna say, if you can, avoid hot gluing within a very furry object. It makes for a very hard time. So the way that I measured the maximum height for the wire for my supports was by measuring the base of the teddy bear to kind of the shoulders, and then measuring the length of the neck, and then adding about an inch, inch and a half to account for the protrusion up into the head of the teddy bear. Now, this was intended to be slightly longer than necessary, as there is cardboard and hot glue, and in the center, beans, in the way of these wire pieces reaching all the way down to the base. However, I did want to give myself more to work with than not enough. That ended up being about, I think, 18 inches for the longest neck, and kind of just varied from there. To make the portion that went into the head, I just kind of created a little coil of wire. I did this so that the wire did not poke through the bear. I was worried wire is pointy, fabric succumbs to pointy things, and so I did not want to have it protruding in any way, shape, or form.
We've reached the part of every teddy bear process where it gets a little hard to actually see what's going on. But what I have here is the base stuffed with its base, and then 7 bear tubes. Some of them have doubled up wire because when I got towards the end, I realized I actually did have enough to double it up. I wasn't sure if I was going to. So first things first is, I have no idea. I think I'm going to plan out where I want these guys to live. I think I'm just going to kind of go for it, honestly.
As stated, the plan was guesstimation, basically. I knew I wanted to get the center head in first, and I could place everything around it. I did cut and measure where the neck fabric on the base teddy bear was going to come up before I glued these necks in, just to make sure that it actually would be long enough that it would get covered. I didn't want to have any of that fluff exposed. So a lot of trimming, and then the way that I decided to glue these in was with hot glue. Again, it's my favorite friend. I just put a little bit on the styrofoam and then shoved the wire through it. My hope was that it would kind of carry the hot glue down with it and get solidified to the styrofoam. Once I had all of them on, it was time to stuff the neck a little bit more because otherwise I was having a hard time kind of visualizing the fabric. And then I realized that I did not like the single supports and I wanted to go ahead and give them a little bit more. My original supports were just the offcuts from trimming the necks to the appropriate length. I didn't think that I would need too much, and I just kind of shoved them in there and then realized, well, if I'm going to go to this effort, I might as well try to stabilize a little bit more of the neck, and so I cut some longer wire pieces to do that. You saw earlier as I was turning the tubes that I had to cut a hole in the back of the neck to just kind of finish off getting that fluff and stuffing it in there. So this is just proof that I did finish it appropriately with a needle and thread. For some reason, only after I had fully attached them to the bear, I'm gonna be honest, I debated just gluing this shut, but I decided to actually do it properly and take the time and sew them up individually, as much of a pain as it was.
One, I don't know how well you can see into this teddy bear, if at all, and then two, I don't think this is nearly as well thought out as the internal structure for the angel, but I did want to show it off before I stitch him all the way up. So I do think I should have done all of them with the doubled up posts. I just think these are much more strong and secure. It's so hard to see because the fuzz got stuck in the hot glue. I stuck extra wires into the styrofoam and twisted them up around, kind of going up into, so you can see this one kind of just like this stops. This is an end. So this neck is still on a single post. However, the base here is the strongest. Because one of the things I'm worried about, wire has a certain point where you can bend it and flex it and bend it and flex it, but the more and more you do that, the weaker and weaker it gets. There is a certain point where it will break. Now, this is pretty strong wire. I can bend it with my hands, but it also, like, this is light pressure. Like, it actually still requires, like, a good bit of pressure to manipulate. So I wanted to make sure that the base of these is the most solid, because arguably that's the point that's going to be experiencing the most power from this thing moving around at all. Like, if someone, like, yanks it to the side, technically, like, this would be a lever, like a breaking point. I would expect if it would break anywhere, it would break down there. So I reinforced all of the ones that were single with this weird spiderweb spaghetti that you cannot see at all inside anymore, because it's all been covered by hot glue and foam. And you can see there's something else. There's this circle, because again, I'm trying to change, I guess, where that fulcrum action is happening. And am I using physics words correctly? Probably not. I'm a software engineer, not a mechanical one. This is a layer of 3. It is a ring, and it goes all the way around. And then I secured each one by wrapping a little piece around it, and then I hot glued it in place. The center is not hot glued in place. This one's just kind of there, but the center neck I'm also not too worried about. It is a double post. It's got the hot glue pyramid at the bottom. It doesn't have any extra, but this is just done as a little bit of extra stability for that in the center there. I may hot glue it, I may not. I haven't decided yet. This feels pretty solid. The heads wobble, but like when I move the head, it stays there. So the wire is capable of supporting this head and neck weight, which is really good. Probably should have tested that beforehand. So that is the abomination of a construction that's in there. But this whole thing feels pretty sturdy, which I'm actually really happy about. Like, it's not, the bear itself isn't going to topple over, and I actually have faith that these heads are going to stay vertical. So arguably, I think I've done a good job.
Thank God for fluffy fabric. Otherwise, these stitches would look horrible. What I ended up doing was going through and just trying to tack in a couple places all of the necks to each other. I really wanted to avoid having any obvious gaps in between the necks. I was trying to avoid fluff possibly coming up through them. This was hard. This was really messy. Something like an upholstery needle probably would have worked much better for a lot of this. Those are large curved needles, and they just kind of help you get into all of those weird cracks and crevices. I don't have one. I just have normal sewing needles, so that is what I was using. But yeah, went all the way around the teddy bear doing this. Once the necks were attached together, it was time to seam this whole thing up. I started at the center back that I had to open to get the base of the teddy bear in place, and originally I was going to try to do a ladder stitch, which results in a very, very invisible seam. However, the fabric was pulled a little taut because of the base inside, and so that made it really hard, so I just kind of went for a whip stitch all the way around, trying to really, really secure it. And then the even more haphazard process began of securing all of the necks to that base teddy bear fabric. And I tried to get into all of the cracks and crevices between the necks as much as possible, really just trying to go for, I need it to be attached and I need there to be no holes. I didn't really care too much about how perfect this looked, because again, thank God for fluffy fabric. That really was my savior here. It did take me a couple pieces of string to get all the way around, because working with too long of a string just becomes really cumbersome and unwieldy, and it'll start knotting on itself. So it's more annoying, but shorter pieces of string just make your life a lot easier. yeah, I went all the way around trying to get into all the nooks and crannies, and this is really where it started to come to life. It is finally time for me to fulfill the promise that I made you at the beginning of the video. Here is the reveal of the heart. I decided to go with the phrase heads over heels for you, with the for and you abbreviated obviously like a conversation heart. This close-up is just to show the fact that I'm terrible at planning and spacing my letters. I also don't have heat erasable marker. So I drew on my fabric with a actual like pen. So the outline of the letters is visible and it bothered me incessantly. This is also to show a close-up of how I did my embroidery, and I just did basically a straight stitch, and then I believe it's called the stem stitch, where you go basically and wrap your string around each stitch that you've done. It results in really, really nice straight letters that stand up and kind of away from the page. It also corrects if you have any kind of like little wobbly letters. This is like the best stitch to kind of correct them, so you don't have to be too worried. You want to keep your lines straight, but they don't have to be like too straight. But yeah, that is the embroidery that I did and turned it into the heart. I'd also like to note here that you can see those tiny little dots that I marked. Those are done in Sharpie. Those were to mark the center point of the heart and then the outer edges and the bottom. The gold fabric is actually leftover fabric from the Angel project from last year. I thought the gold would be a fun, kind of like contrasting color. Also, please note, I cut this heart out without a pattern and it actually almost ruined the heart. These teddy bear hearts tend to have a really weird shape. They are not like a normal heart, and so I do believe it's because it's a 3D object that, again, you're translating from a flat shape. So I just kind of winged it, cut out a piece to match it on the back, clipped it all together, and left a way too small hole where I tried to then turn it out and stitched it together. And here is my futile attempt to turn the heart inside out with that tiny hole. That did not work. I had to seam rip it larger and then was able to turn it out where I realized it looked weird. So I decided to go back in and sew much, I guess, shallower kind of bumps to the top of the heart. And that ended up giving me a much, much nicer heart shape in the end, even though I was really scared because I cut my fabric away before I turned it inside out. Don't do that, kids. Oh my God, don't do that. Verify your stitch line with either a basting stitch or just by seeing what it looks like before you cut away your excess fabric, because you cannot add fabric back once you cut it away. And for the stuffing of this heart, I decided to use all of the scraps from the teddy bear. Everything that I had cut off, including the eyes, is what I used to stuff this heart. So there was no waste from the teddy bear. I did save the bow fabric. I didn't use the bow fabric and I did not stuff the heart with it, but I did save it because it is perfectly usable fabric. But all of the other scraps and cutoffs actually was perfect to fill the heart. I just had to add a little bit of extra stuffing, again, that once was inside the teddy bear, and it filled the heart up perfectly, and I just top stitched it closed and make it as invisible and seamless as possible. That's also why I did put my seam on the bottom of the heart, just so that it could be a little bit more hidden. I think this ended up working out so perfectly, and so here is the final reveal.
Here he is. So we have the final Hydra right here. I am so beyond happy with how he turned out. All of the heads, some of them stare into my soul a little bit, but that's okay. I can't decide if he's better or worse in terms of creepy factor than Enoch, who is the biblically accurate teddy bear. This is probably my favorite weird little tradition that I have accidentally started. Now it's purposeful. It started as an accident. This video should be coming out the day before Valentine's Day, so happy early Valentine's Day to you, and I hope you have a good one doing whatever traditions you do or don't have with whoever you do or don't have to do them with. So have fun, celebrate something, whether that be making an abomination or not. I hope you have a good one. This is kind of one of my favorite things I do now. It's absurd and I love every second of it. So I don't know entirely what I'm going to do for next year. So if you have ideas, let me know in the comments down below what you think would be fun to turn into a bizarre teddy bear. Also, don't forget, comment down below if you have a better idea for this heart than what I came up with. I'm very interested to see, if one, any of you guessed it correctly, and two, if any of you have better suggestions. I'm interested to see what you come up with. So genuinely, thank you so much for watching. These videos are always longer than I want them to be, but yet they're so involved. I don't feel like I can cut content out. So sorry, I'm rambly, but this was fun. I hope you had a fun time watching it. So thank you so much for watching. Happy crafting, and I will see you in the next one.